Well, welcome everyone to the 2018 Lifestream Hands-On Certification Workshop. I'm excited to have you all here. It's been 5 years since we did the last one, and yeah, I know. We usually average 4 years, but I got lost. I kind of got lost in the last year of contemplating and figuring out the mission. And one of the nice things about it, since we've been doing this for 13 years, it's all about planting the seeds. You know, we've been germinating seeds for over 13 years to see how the technology is welcomed, how it's received, and the realizations that people come. And so what's great about it is that when I got the nudge, you know, usually some people step up and they say, I want to do this, you know, they want to be a part of this. And that's usually if I listen, the inspiration starts the mechanism of the workshop starting to form. And then everything gets out of the way and it just happens very gracefully. So we had, of course, we have a lot of people who do the nice carpool from the OC, and I highly commend and thank you for committing and making that trek and that commitment. I know what it takes on a Friday to do it, but that's the reason why we have food, so you don't have to worry about eating and all that. But yeah, it's great, you know, and Orange County has been second to LA and Santa Monica, the Palisades area for the technology. And I know all of you were kind of, you know, had that connection with Leia, who just recently left and went up to Eureka. So Eureka
Kansas
and
right
Kansas.
now.
Yeah, that's right. She went to see her mom, and then she's going to Eureka for a while. So yeah, she's bringing the live stream with her up there, which is great as well. But it was just excellent, you know, just seeing all that momentum coming from the Living Temple. And of course, I know there's a couple people committed to fill that slot, you know, to fill that demand of the live stream. Because there's definitely, of course, when we understand everything that's happening in the world right now, it's been, you know, beyond words, you know, and of course we're just going to generalize, you know, the energy. And of course, if you're sensitives, you know, like most of us are when we get into the live stream, it changes our understanding of energy and the connections to it. So we get to feel, and it's much better when you realize, when you go, what's going on? You know, at first it's usually what's going on with me, but then you realize what's going on in the world. You know, where is this feeling coming from? What is this empathic, you know, energy that's happening? And we have a greater connection to what is. And that's one of the key things behind this. And one of the key things that when I started this mission was not to assume what I thought it was, but intuition told me to observe, you know, to offer it to people and then to observe their experiences, really pay attention, you know, to their behaviors before, what they're dealing with. And then after they're introduced to this energy field, how they perceive themselves and how they hold themselves from that. And it was a very interesting phenomenon at first because I was just a complete observer, right? I wasn't telling people what it was doing or what I thought it was doing. I wasn't being suggestive at all. 13 years, I still avoid doing that. And that's the reason why people have such a hard time trying to explain this technology to others. It's that, you know, they're like, you know, I can't explain it, but they try to put it in their own words, and I kind of almost insist that you do. Instead of reading from a paragraph, you know, it's better for you to have your own personal experiences. Well, you know, that all starts to come forth over the weeks, you know, as we start to come together, you know, as this group dynamic, you know, because we're all going to get to know each other. And the nice thing about it is that we have different tiers of people. This is a great dynamic, as usually the workshops are people that just start the technology journey. And this one has different layers. We have like almost like the front row, people are getting their technologies like right now, you know, but then we have others that just received them in the last week or two. And then we have others that have had them for several weeks or several months. So that's an interesting dynamic, as we'll be able to observe from different aspects. We'll get to watch, you know, the shifts that happen with the people in the first time energies, the first week, second, third, and then the progressive aspects of going deeper and learning the hands-on techniques and the effects that happens. The group dynamic's wonderful for that because you get all this hands-on energy, on a weekly basis, and it's just great. It's just like, when we get the hands-on, there's something very profound about it that, unfortunately, people have been asking me, they say, well, how do I do this to myself? And I'm like, well, you can't really. There's something about the human system that this energy field that is unlike anything else on the planet. It's uncomparable to any other species on the planet as well. So, but when we can transfer this energy through touch as well as our intentional focus, that's where everything takes a whole different understanding. And that's the reason why we had to be very gracious, and patient, to really understand and not to go out there full-fledged, get massive amount of money and try to promote it and get it out there and market it. It was never going to work that way. So there's a higher understanding that comes from this, a higher realization that comes from this journey, because we are tapping into an energy field, patient understanding. And in research, there is a very interesting cycle that happens planetarily. And this cycle could happen every 6,000 years to 23,000 years. And there is a shift in the energy fields. And when that shift starts, we have the ability to tap into that. And then in this current time, with our consciousness and our abilities within our technology, we create the infrastructures to generate it, to bring it forth. And of course, if you travel to Egypt, no one in here has gone to Egypt with me, but if that's coming, 2020. But when you understand and you're standing in front of these structures that were built thousands of years ago and completely perplexes the greatest minds today at how it was done, the only way that you can rationalize it, of course there's stories that the governments tell, to appease people so they move on, but the stories, are they truth? Are they the origin of it? And 99% of it isn't. But the story's been told, for decades, so now it's a belief, it's ingrained. But now we're getting to the understanding where we're realizing there was something more going on. And they had to have been tapping into another energy source. And the ancients, especially like in Egypt, they called it the Sekhem, which is actually the translation to the life force of the planet. So when they tapped into the Sekhem, they were able to focus and set intentions to do whatever they desired. And it allowed them to consciously construct from the fourth and fifth dimensional understanding. At this point in time, we've been taught 3 dimensions. But in the last decade or a little bit longer, we're starting to get into fourth dimensional aspects. We're programming in fourth dimensions. When we understand augmented reality and virtual reality is taking us into a whole different dimensional understanding, where you can put on a visor and this whole area turns into a whole different world. And we're going to do a little bit of introduction on that throughout the weeks, actually. So, but that's the whole thing, that we realize this conscious shift that's happening, and also the energies. So the first tier of it is always, we're like the first round. We're like the first ones that are preparing, for this understanding, to bring in this new energy and to be able and to be not shocked when it actually amplifies and everyone around us is being highly affected and not knowing what's going on. We're almost like the stewards and also the way showers. We're taking a big step into that higher state of consciousness. And this is where it gets real interesting. I've been watching this for a long time. And it's getting more and more exciting, because now we're elevating in our energy tiers. When we talk about the planetary shifts, we watch the elevations of human consciousness. Now, the sleepy ones, the ones that are trapped in the duality, when that amplification field starts to raise, the amplification of what they are or programmed into just becomes amplified. The ones that have been doing the true work to clear themselves and to move into higher states of consciousness can see from above. You have a higher awareness to see, instead of seeing things straight on or through a narrow perspective, which most people, you can see. Like, people can barely see what's in front of them. They have no idea what's coming at them. But when you shift your awareness, then all of a sudden you can see the bigger picture. And then from there, when you start to master this, then you can start finding the path of least resistance, the most graceful path in your life. And this is where it really starts to change. And sometimes a little bit of guidance is necessary, because if you're doing this journey alone, you're like, what's going on with me? If we don't have a group dynamic or people of like-minded individuals and experiences, you got to do it yourself. One to reference on. I was out there for 8 years, just trying to figure things out. I was going to, climbing these sacred mountains, going into these caves and going to these ancient dwellings by myself, sitting in them for hours, just trying to understand and open myself up or connect to the Wi-Fi, of the ancient knowledge. And then after a while, it started to happen. We start to understand that this tethering is only that. It's just because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught to stay here, stay in this point. And there's a lot of interference to stop us from thinking. But not anymore. All that's in disruption. And this is where we get to watch. Incredible. If you're paying attention and you're not just caught into what the media is feeding us, then you get to see that there is something big happening. There's this whole dynamic of us exploring outside of our world, as well as technologies that are in form, that are being focused to actually be implemented in the next generation. So sometimes it can take a while before you can dismantle an old system, to bring in a new system. But it's almost like using an analogy of we're believing that the speed of sound can never be broken. Got to go back, 5 decades. And but everyone said, no, we can't do it. We've tried, we can't do it. That's the wall, that's the limit, that's as fast as we can go. Until someone said, you know what? I think the problem is that we've been trying to go 750 miles an hour. And we don't build our vehicles to push past that. So let's build a vehicle that goes 1,000 miles an hour. In theory, we haven't proved it yet. But once they did, then all of a sudden they found the veil, they pierced it. And that's when everything changed. The paradigm at that moment was shifted. It was very hard for anyone to, to rebuke that and say, no, speed of sound cannot be broken, after it's been broken several times. But, people sometimes can hold on to that mentality. And that's where we have to be very graceful in our lives, because you can't shake them and say, dude, pay attention, the speed of sound has been broken. Look, well, you can't prove it, you're just telling me. I haven't gone past that, you're saying there's aircrafts to do it, but prove it to me. There's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of beliefs that people will not want to let go of. And this is where it gets really interesting. But if you're on the other side of it, and that's usually what happens in the Lifestream journey, that's when you take a step back and you start observing instead of getting entangled. And then you choose, okay, well, this is a little too interference. This looks like a much more graceful, higher thought experience. I'm gonna go this way. I'm just gonna be really nice about it. I'm gonna exit and head over here. And we do it gracefully. We don't do it with aggression or too many words. That's the mastery. First it might be a little sloppy. If we have traumatic stuff that's coming up, and that's part of the cellular work that we're all going to experience, is that the processes, and that's what we guide on a weekly basis, because there is a cellular science behind this, and I've watched hundreds of people go through it, and when you follow the protocols, there is what happens in the cells, what happens in our memory, what happens when we have the ability to recharge the human system, and how the body and mind work to self-correct itself. Instead of compartmentalizing, it says, I can find balance now. I can release this. And this happens in sicknesses and in lack of stagnant energy. When you put energy back, you start getting function again. And that's one of the key things. And of course, higher function in the mind makes it a lot easier for the body to follow. And that's one of the key things. That's the reason why we just don't take this technology and focus on a particular area in the body. We start with the mind. That's what we have to do. We have to wake the mind up and have it move into a diagnostic and start to communicate. Brain and body have to start communicating again, because there's a lot of methods out there that disconnect you from what's really happening. And we've been, taught for so long, it's like when you feel pain, oh, here, take a pill, it'll block the pain, and you won't feel it anymore. Instead of saying, oh, well, let's see where the pain's coming from. No one really stops to do that. You say, here, just take a pill. Or you say, I don't have time. I need to take a pill, because I got to get this done. So we're overriding what our intuition has been telling us. And so if we put that off too long, the communication stops until a chronic issue starts to flare up. And so when the chronic issues do come forth, when you're taking this journey, then you'll know why it started. Of course, your subconscious isn't going to start yelling at you and say, well, I've been telling you, that's not going to happen. There's going to be imagery. You're going to have memories. The traumas will slowly start to come up, gracefully. And that's the reason why, we have a protocol to this, so we don't want to induce a healing crisis on anyone. We don't want it to be a severe shift. That's the reason why we toned the technologies down a long time ago. So it's a more graceful experience, and that's the progressive aspect. And that's the key, is that we want, because we live in a progressive aspect in our lives, in our day-to-day. And for us, if someone, of course, there are a lot of people that say, well, I've had pain for 10 years. And if I say to them, I said, well, do you want to get rid of it? And they go, yes. And I go, when? And they go, right now. I just look at them, because, of course, they're used to the pill, to block the pain. But if they really want to get rid of their pain, I say, well, it might take a year or two for that to go away. Are you ready to make that commitment? Oh, I got too much to do. No, I'll just keep taking the pills. So that's the dynamic of the person that we wouldn't really work with. We're not going to force them. We're not going to try to convince them. If they're not in that higher state of consciousness to really understand what's going on, then we have to kind of let them keep going. But if you are, on that journey, self-exploration, for that higher state of self-awareness and mind-body connection, this is the perfect journey for you. And I promise you, you're going to get it. That's one of the greatest gifts that happens on this. You stay the course, doesn't matter who you are, what you're dealing with. No, I've gone through a lot of it. Been doing it for 13 years, so. And I know when to do it and when not to. You always have to trust that, like when we make the commitments, and that's part of the protocols, like the people that are receiving their technologies today, we start you off, because you're doing the workshop, we start you off with the protocol to use the technology a minimum of 15 minutes a day, 6 days a week. And you can take 1 day off for your body to balance your circadian rhythm. And that's one of the commitments that it's going to be really beneficial for you. And there's no maximum. That's all I'll say for the first week. So minimum 15 minutes a day, 6 days a week. And then from there, trust your intuition. If you're guided to use it more, then do so. If you're guided to use it less, if you're sensitive, then, you can step back from it. So this is all part of it, where there's nothing forced. But, again, the commitment to do it 15 minutes a day is usually something that no one has a hard time doing, unless they're not prioritizing, if they're not really in it, if they're in the workshop for all the wrong reasons. And I've been pretty good at not letting that happen. We've had other people, it's a learning process, because you try to, work with everyone, but then all of a sudden you just see, okay, this isn't working. This person has got their own thing going. This isn't going to work. So we just gracefully say, nope, this isn't for you, but okay, yeah, there's 3 of you. No, I'm just kidding. So great. Well, that's the first step. I know that's a lot, that I just hit you with. But it's going to get fascinating, and one of the things that I'm really loving, about this is that usually at this point in time, if I like to open the room up to questions, and also if you're open to it, is to share who you are and your experience with the live stream, how you connected to it, or how long you've been doing it, and what's your intention, what really drew you to it, and what the intention is. No pressure, if you don't have to answer it all that way, but I can almost, like, there's a couple people that right away, I know that they get it and they understand and their journey, but there's a few people that, of course, like up front here, sitting and doing the work with Leah, and the realizations, that you've been experiencing, the balance within the mind and body, the quality of life returning. And that's the key, behind this journey. It's all about quality of life. It's nothing else. it doesn't cure, it's not a cure, and that's one of the key things. But when you give the body the energy it needs, it has the ability to self-correct itself. So everything changes. Our sleep cycles change, our circadian rhythm changes, of course our cellular vitality changes, and that's one of the key things. Now the reason why, you'll probably ask, well, why 15 minutes a day? Well, if a person like yourselves, like when you were seeing Leah from a specialist, the 15, or you go once a week, that's usually the normal thing. Yeah, well, you probably started with once a week, and then you increased it, because you realize, well, wait a minute, this is doing something for me. Yeah. How many times were you? Twice a week. Okay. 2 to 3 times a week. 2 to 3 times a week. That's the progressive aspect, because all of a sudden, when you're given the choice, it's almost like remember, there's a conscious subconscious connection to this work. Now, when a person says, when you ask, how many times can I do this? And they say, well, let's start with once a week, and then we'll, after a couple weeks, we could talk about it. And then when you realize that they're there 2-3 times a week, then you say, hey, can I, I really want to come and do more. Now, there's the conscious connection to this and the subconscious connection. It's almost like seeing a counselor, when you commit to, to work through something, and you chose to go see counseling because you want to resolve something, and you're not able to do it yourself. You need some guidance, and your friends and family, they don't get it, or you don't want to burden them with it, or they told you to don't put that stuff on me, so you chose to seek another path. Now, every time that we go back, when they say, okay, I'll see you next week, there's a subconscious connection, and you're preparing for it. You're contemplating things that you've resolved or that was brought up the first week, and then when you go in the next week, what the topic's going to be, and the counselor will they'll look at their notes and say, oh, we addressed this. How was your week from that? And things will start to come to the surface. So with the live stream, that's accelerated. It's accelerated, but it's also graceful. And that's the key thing about it. Because again, when we accompany limitless energy to the cellular system, to the life force, then it has, the first time it realizes, wait a minute, I can get charged up. I don't have to go into energy saving mode, because that's what most of us are doing. We're struggling for energy, and we're in we have so much going on, so many obstacles, so much interference in the subtle energy, where it's hard for us to be able to reconnect, especially in the hustle and bustle. And that's one of the key things. We have to, if we don't take the time to go to the forest or go put your feet in the ocean, or meditate, you'll lose your connection. And 90% of the people out there are in the spiral. They're topical, and they're, you can see, they can't silence. There's constant chatter, their minds, they can't find that silence or that peace within. So these are the key things that when the conscious and subconscious, when we start to work, we start to reestablish the links to ourselves. And when we do that, then we can get into the root of it. We don't say, I don't know what's wrong with me anymore. You start to realize what's going on in your system and how to self-correct. And that's one of the greatest gifts that you could ever receive, is that that higher realization of how we function. Where the mind goes, the body follows. And that's one of the key things when you take this journey. You'll realize, the reason why that happened is when I did this. If we had an accident, car accident, first time it's usually the victim situation. Now this is where it gets fun. Yeah, I don't usually do this on the first week, but it's going to be fun because I want to do it. Is that, that's the reason why the insurance companies figured out no fault insurance, that whole thing, because everyone's at fault. Doesn't matter who hit you or if you hit them. There was a choice that you made. You left your house at a particular time. You decided to turn right instead of going straight down 2 blocks. You took an alternate route, and your intuition was probably telling you, just go your normal route. But you said, oh, I can cut 2 minutes off if I turn right, and I can speed down this one. So when you start getting to that higher conscious review of a trauma experience and why the collision happened, you can almost see it in clear detail when you get to that higher state of consciousness. And you go, oh my gosh, I take total responsibility for that now. I'm not going to blame that guy ever again, because now I realize what I did that got me at that point, that caused me to be distracted. I wasn't in defensive mode. I didn't see it coming. I was like answering a text, all that. And you'll realize the stuff that you did to cause the collision to happen. And now your body, you have to stop and heal. And your whole path in your life is completely altered because of that altercation, that collision. You stop and you go, wow, what happened? So that's part of the journey. If we look at it from a deeper, higher aspect, things will grow within ourselves, and you're going to establish an incredible relationship with yourself. Doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. That's one of the greatest gifts if it happens at any time in your life. Because from there, you open yourself up to the highest potential of what you're capable of. So that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to leave it at that. And I'd like to open up the room if anyone has any questions of, anything like, why is it so heavy? Why is the technology so heavy? Can it run on batteries? Can I take a bath with it? No.
No. How long can it stay running for it one time?
One time? Well,
can it stay running 24/7?
If it has a timer on it, then you can run it as long as what the timer says. And we have a rule, unless you have a clinical model, which is the self-ventilated version. If you run it for 30 minutes, rest it for 30 minutes before using it again. So if you have a sealed version, then it's a 15-minute on, 15-minute off. Because they work under hermetically sealed. It's a sealed chamber inside to get the effect, and the heat cannot easily dissipate. So you just want it. If you let it cool down, the live streams last a long time. If you get them hot, then that starts to wear the components down inside. Phoenix?
First of all, thank you for having this and for being here and all that you are and all that you do.
Thank you for being.
Yeah, thank you. Did you discover this, or did you come into it where you downloaded this when you were in Egypt?
No. Totally opposite.
When did you,
Well, honestly, yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
The physical body never went to Egypt until 8 years, how many years ago? So 2008 is when I went, 10 years ago, for the first time. But when I was a kid, I had visions of the pyramids. And unfortunately, I couldn't make sense of it because there was, in the 70s when I was having these visions, there are lasers beaming from the pyramids and these colored lights. And there was no such thing. But of course, when I went in 2008, and I was on a horse, and I was trying to get to the destination because we had private at the pyramids. Long story, I'm really making an abbreviated version. Riding the horse over the plains, I came over the ridge, and I saw the pyramids, and I slowed the horse down, and all of a sudden, this light show started, and these lasers started. And I just stopped the horse, and the guy said, "Come on, we can make it." I go, "No, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." And I was actually in the same spot as that vision when I was 13 years old for the first time. Don't share that very often, but when it happens, it just completely just breaks you apart. It was graceful. Of course, that was a very rough first journey for me, because there was part of a cycle to go there. And that happened when I developed the first prototype. And that was very interesting because when I turned it on, when I had the eureka moment, no pun intended, when I realized it all came together, because it came together in my head, now I just had to do is build it. But it took my entire life to get it to that point of knowing exactly how to build it and go against my education to do so. But also remembering, what I remembered when I was working, in the special projects, at a young age. So when it happened, the next morning, I woke up and I didn't know what it was. Well, I did and I didn't. But it was the Eye of Ra from the movie Stargate floating in my mind's eye, and it just drifted out. I'm like, because I worked on the movie Stargate, and the Eye of Ra was pretty awesome. And but then I realized, I said, I had to look it up, and then I realized it was the Eye of Horus and what the actual representation meant. But it never left me. It was like something that just turned on in my mind's eye, and I was obsessed with this symbol. And I started to explore it. I started to research. I started to wear it all the time. I didn't get a tattoo, but the obsession was to understand it. From the Fibonacci, the mathematical alignment of what it represented, the similarities, to the pineal gland or to the center of our brain, and the resemblance of it. But that's what brought me to seeking out the ancient knowledge, reading beyond books, and I having to take the physical body there now. So there was much more to it, but have to give you the abbreviation of it. But yes, it's 43 years before I was able to bring it forth. It was on my 43rd year. I had to hit my head for it to happen, though. I had one of those. Actually, my son had a very interesting video that was on the. He was watching it before he went to get shoes. It was about a man, accidental genius, and he was like a weightlifter, and he was young, and he went someplace, and he came across a corner, and he got jumped. And someone impacted him so hard in the back of his head, he fell to the floor, and after they just kicked him and beat the heck out of him. But he was blacking out. And the next day, he had OCD, obsessive compulsive. He said, he got caught. And for like a year, he couldn't even leave his house. But then when he did, he started seeing everything in the Fibonacci. He started seeing this complex mathematical structure and everything. And it was because of this massive brain alteration where he became this genius. And he didn't know why. He didn't have the education to relate what was going on until he met this professor. And she goes, "You're seeing this stuff. You're seeing this." And he showed it. She showed it to him, and he goes, "Yes." And so she was able to educate him of what he was experiencing. He said he has one of the most advanced, complex minds that I've ever experienced. And he's seeing that he can see the geometry and everything, and he can write it out and show it to you, in its form. And so these are the things that happens, like if you have a mind-altering, situation. Even car accidents, I've seen people get completely activated. Struck by lightning is really cool if you survive it, but just imagine, people that get struck by lightning, their neurological pathways are never the same. They are completely, it's like the Liechtenstein effect, how the spidering, and it just rips through your entire system. It's going to rewire you. Anyone ever meet Daniel Brinkley? He got struck by lightning 3 times. He's like one of the most incredible, psychics, I guess you would have to say. He'll just stand there, and if he's in the moment, he can completely read you. He reads your matrix. Unfortunately, he's dualistic. He goes over there and drinks beers and complains about conspiracies. But when he's on, absolutely amazing. So he has this incredible gift, but unfortunately, he has to be fed the opposite because, he was distorted 3 times. Struck by lightning 3 times in his life. Dead twice, revived twice. Yeah, very fascinating. When I met him, and I was trying to, because I was seeing everyone's energy for a while when I was doing this work. When I met him, I'm like, what is going on, with this guy's energy field? And, I went up to my friend William Henry, and he says, "Oh, that's Daniel Brinkley. You don't know who that is? He got struck by lightning 3 times. I'm like, because I didn't know who he was. And he's telling me, I'm like, what? Okay, that's making sense, but wow, what the heck is going on? He's like in and out. He's not really here. He's like in and out of this plane of understanding. Oh, fascinating stuff. Anything else? And someone else put their hand up. You have a question? Yeah.
How you mentioned it takes time to read other people's energy. How long?
That's if you want to. The first thing is that, what we understand, actually, I'm going to be passing out an energy reference sheet. Paula, can you come up? This is a good time to actually pass that out.
Sure.
And so we're going to, as soon as certain things are brought up, that's what we're going to start to address. And the nice, I did bring it, here they are. Now, so when we talk about energy, we're going to pass out a sheet that's called the map of consciousness. And what I'd like you to do when you get these, I want you to pencil in where you think you are on this. You know, it'll actually be a fun little experiment for us. You don't really have to. I'm just kind of messing with you, but you'll have a when you read it, you'll relate to where you are, and it doesn't matter where you are. You know, at this point in time, but you know when you, like in any process, you know, you always you try to find the baseline. You know, of what you're working with, and then from there, if the intention is to elevate, then that's the key. You know, so of course, if someone is completely fearful, you know, and you know, if there's fear, then you can see there's a base frequency, a very low frequency, that's based on of the consciousness of possibilities. You know, so when we realize, you know, if I just say, well, let's think of fear, how many people around you are fear-based?
A lot of people.
Okay. Now, you know, of course, Cynthia, you said that. Are you fearful?
Usually not.
Okay. So where are you? That you think, if you don't mind me asking.
I'd say reason, acceptance.
You're an accept. Okay. So why are you hanging out with all these fearful people? They're so out of your frequency.
That's why I don't want to go back there.
Okay. Well, that's usually the first way. You know, you would ask the question why. Okay, if you're in a higher state of acceptance, you know, then it's easy to tell why you do this. It's because you're in service. Mm-hmm. You know, you're here to help people. You know, you want to ease people in their lives. You want to show them potential. You want to, you know, move them from fear to happiness. Mm-hmm. And you know, you know, a lot of us in this room are like that. You know, we're here, you know, to serve. You know, and some of us are trying to find our service. You know, we're exploring, but we're here for a reason. If you think it's just for your own physical health, that's fine. But I have a feeling the dynamic is a little bit deeper than that, because you have a deep caring. You're not, you know, you're more empathetic than sympathetic in most people's lives. You know, the people around you. You want to relate to them, you know, instead of just going, oh, well, that's just tough, you know, just harden yourself up, you'll be fine. You know, so that's a dynamic that usually doesn't, you know, click in this type of experience or journey. So, but us, you know, when we're saying, well, you know, a lot of people can be very vocal about it. You know, well, let me help you. You know, I can, you know, let's see if there's any, or you know, is there anything I can do for you? You know, you're being verbal that way about, you know, offering to help. And of course, you know, it's very rare that people do take it unless you can find the graceful approach to it. You know, you start finding the dynamic that you can empathize with the person and then relate to them. Mm-hmm. So that's, you know, when you start elevating, like where you are, you have the ability to connect with the fearful person, and then probably by the time your conversation or your time with them is done, you have them into courage or neutrality. They're in a neutral state. They don't fearful after experiencing with you. You know, they feel, wow, I feel a lot better now. Thanks. You know, I really appreciate that. So then you realize you have the ability, when you use a reference chart, to elevate a person's consciousness and elevate a person's vibration. And of course, that naturally happens with the technology of Lifestream. And we get to watch this every single time. Doesn't matter who you are. If a person does not leave fear-based and angry after an experience, it's very rare that happens. Very rare. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's extremely rare. And if it does, I really take notice. I really step up and I pay attention to that person's dynamic. So yeah. Anybody willingness in the willingness? Yeah, had a feeling. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, here's a tricky one. Who's in the love energy? Okay, okay. I'm gonna ask that again. Who's in the real love energy? You hesitated that time. Okay. Now, of course, the terminology, we'll address that later. I'm not going to really stick on this, but, put that in your notes, pay attention to it, and, we're going to use that as a reference. So if you want to give yourself your baseline, be honest with yourself. It's one of the best things you can do. Just put a little pencil or a little asterisk next to where you are right now. Where you were yesterday, or what you're teetering around. If you're floating, you say, yeah, for the last 3 days I was fearful, but I'm feeling better now because I'm here. And then you realize that there's an elevation. But if you were in fear, that's what you want to address. You want to bring it to your consciousness and acknowledge it. Because if we push it off, it's much harder to get around. Because then while you do this work, your subconscious is going to try to get it out. And if you keep trying to push it down, then it becomes very unpleasant. But if you're graceful about it, if you let it realize what's going on, because that's the reason why when someone acquires this technology, I said, if you ever have a question, email me. I'll give you a thorough answer. If you have something that you're going through, let me know. I'm always there. I might not answer right away because I do have a life sometimes, but I always do get back to you. Yes. So this is a good reference. I'm in reason. I'll be honest. Ineffable.
What did you just say?
I said I'm in reason.
You're in reason.
Yeah, because I have a hard time with love. I really don't, because I've gone through the process of understanding it. But we have to understand the levels of love. That's the reason why I said the real love, and then there's the higher love. Then there's the love consciousness, instead of just the word. Because, again, what I've learned is that I rarely even say that word. Because if you have a room full of people like this, or not like this, but if you're in an audience with 150 people, and I say, I'm going to say a word, and I want you guys just to think about it. Love. And you leave it there. And I promise you that some people, when they perceive the word, there's a conditioning. There's a conditional love experience that's tied to it. There's also traumas tied to it. You'll go back to when your father was beating you with a belt saying, I'm doing this because I love you. Because that's an impact. That's tied to the love word, the love frequency. So some people will move from a higher frequency to an anger, a fearful, a traumatized experience, because they're holding on to the conditional programming of what others perceive love to be. And so that's part of the release factor, is breaking free of those patterns, or those false beliefs that others said, well, tough love. I'm doing this because I love you. I'm going to slap you around because I love you. No. That's a time of the past. We're removing that. We're breaking free of those programs. So it's a lot easier to talk about courage than it is love. I'll tell you. But we'll deal with that. Any questions about this list before we move on?
I would think that there may be times in a day that situations happen that you may jump around that list a bit.
Yeah, you can. That's one of the key things. But one of the things is that when we move into a higher state of consciousness, if you get to the peaceful, if you get to joyfulness, it's very hard to get pulled back down unless it's new to you. Because there's rhythms that happen in our cycles and our personal experiences. You can, of course, now there's pills you can take that'll, put, certain, synthetics, in your body to give you that feeling. Of course, the key thing, and I've had a lot of people that have taken experiences, they go, wow, I don't need a pill. I don't need the drug to feel this way. My system is, I'm feeling this way in this energy. And, that's one of the key aspects is because we're all looking to elevate ourselves. And that's what we have to, sometimes we're not taught that. If you're surrounded by fearful people, no one's talking about love very easily.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a tough love. It's a program love. I'll love you if.
Yeah.
That's the toughest love to
Strings
be
attached.
around. Yeah, yeah. But then I'll hate you if you don't do what I tell you to do, or not, don't follow that list.
Mhm.
And that's like, whoa, that's a flip into polarity,
Mhm.
like real quick. So that's what we have to understand. That's the duality. That's the polarization effect that humanity has been dealing with. And that. It's a little hard to explain that, but when we understand the science and the evolution that's happening, that understanding of the polarization is about to change.
Mhm.
Because like the energy fields, that when we understand the live stream energy, it is a non-polarized energy field. That's the reason why most people go into what we call the homeostasis effect. You move into a balanced state of being. And you're very present when you're in the energy. It kind of drops you in. It's very hard, to think of negatives or to spiral out. It's not impossible. Again, it all depends on where you are on this list when you start the journey. If you're dealing with a lot of trauma, then you're still, spiraling. You can override it, but it should lessen and lessen and lessen the more work that you do, the more connecting, the realizations that we have. It starts to diminish. And then we start to elevate, and we can maintain that energy. And then if we have to, if someone dear to us, or that we're compassionate, someone's fearful, we can walk up and we can move down, because you have to lower your frequency to be able to relate to someone. It's very hard to be a loving individual and communicate with a fearful person, because the frequencies are out of match, are so far away. But if you go down to neutrality, then you can relate to fear, because you once were fearful. Yeah, and then that's when you will have no problem bringing up a fear experience from your past, because it no longer affects you the same way. You found balance in it. And now you can neutralize yourself, address the fear with someone else, and then bring them up into a neutral state, maybe even higher than that. Get them into a joyful state, because now you can articulate, you can see the pattern, you can see the frequency, and you say, yeah, I think I can move this, I can naturally bring this person up a bit, and you do it gracefully. Don't charge them $1,000 to do it, because then it's out of balance. We address the money energy, of course, as well with this.
I'd love to.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you started.
I would love to share. Well, first of all, I'd love to honor you for being so dedicated to this mission, and to all of us here and now. Such an honor, and I'm just beyond words. And my journey with the Lifestream has been one of the most colorful, unique journeys. So I won't be able to tell it all now. Long story, as short as I can make it in this moment for all of us. I was in an extremely chaotic paradigm, playing a ridiculous character. And I started to basically meditate much deeper and more intentional, and started sourcing things into my life very effortlessly, having left many of my possessions behind, including my son. He went and moved with my family for a short period while I graduated and shifted paradigms. And during this course, when my friends had a Lifestream technology, and she was still seeking her balance though, so she taught me and shared what she could, and it was amazing. And then I aligned with this beautiful power couple who taught multidimensional awakening, and basically they work a lot with your second chakra, with your heart's desires, and they do ceremonial style work to help you release your old paradigm and call forth that which you desire to heal and to create and acknowledge within your own being. And they had one of John's Lifestream towers, and what that tower amplified for all of us during that training, for myself personally, was miraculous. And shortly after that, the partner I was co-creating with at the time and we manifested a live stream, and we manifested the tower, and that circled us back into John to, want to deeper understand this technology, and our contract ended. And long story short, the last 2 years I've been facilitating my own ceremonial style private sessions and group experiences, and what this technology has done in a blink of an eye, in a 30-minute session, a 15-minute session, is truly miraculous, because we're truly miraculous. And the fact that we have this, and that we're sitting here and can have this available to all of us, is just so exciting.
Yeah.
So more power to all of us, and expect miracles, and expect them even greater than you already are, because we have to meet this medicine, this technology halfway with our intentions and anything that we're aligning with. So I'm just so excited and honored to be here, and thank you, John, for all of the support.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Very open-hearted experience. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was fun. Well, that's part of the Lifestream journey. That's what the 6 weeks is going to allow us all to experience, because we'll focus on the self for a while, but then we'll become the observer. We'll start to see others, and that's the reason why we get to know each other. The first week we hear our stories as it unfolds, but we also get to see the physical changes, that happens, and that usually it always gets fascinated within 3 to 4 weeks, from the experience. I know you two, you've had it for a few days, but you're probably already realizing just the simple little shifts that have been happening.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
What?
I said it's powerful. It spaced us out at first.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, yeah. The last 2 weeks have been a
We've only
spaced
had it
out
for 2
experience.
days.
Yeah.
We had it for 2 days.
Yeah, they picked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting, a combination of the energetic events that have been happening planetarily. Now it's very hard to explain to people, when they call up and they say, hey, my live stream's acting weird. And when it does, at first I didn't pay much attention to it, but then I would get a second phone call, then I get a third phone call. And all of a sudden I started checking the space weather. And then I realized we were having geomagnetic events or solar storms.
They said the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of this month, these last 4 days have been cuckoo crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when we start to relate, because when we understand all energy is affected this way, and when we are connected in those fields, especially like during these particular events, it can really shift you. The ancients, was a practice, what's called solar consciousness. Is that they would understand this latching. Now, it took centuries for us to finally realize that the sun is not just 93 million miles away from the Earth, and there is anything that's traveling at the speed of light takes 2 to 3 days to arrive here, or the secondary events, the speed of light, it's a lot shorter than that. But the experience is once we started putting satellites and sensors on the terrestrial Earth as well as in space at these different points to observe the sun visually as well as energy. Then all of a sudden the events that were happening on the sun were responding to the instruments almost immediately in space and on Earth. So there was no bridge, there was no distance. And that's when they realized that there's magnetic latches or these vortices or wormholes that bend the laws of physics as we knew it. And they only just about the last 8 to 10 years is when they actually started to put this in accredited curriculum where they're actually announcing it, without a doubt, because they've seen it so many different times. And what they thought was the laws and now are changing. So now, of course, when we say it's an absolute law, it's like, well, that's true based on the speed of sound. If your entire experience is based on that's as far as we can go, then you're right. You are tied to a set of rules, and you can call them the laws. But now, when we broke that, then a whole new set of laws came in. And now they say no one can break the speed of light. Well, that's not true. When they say it's impossible, because every time we realize we just have to question that. Every time we say nothing's impossible, now all of a sudden it's possible. So that breaks our limitation, that breaks our beliefs. So now how far can we go? Well, we're actually limitless when we realize that. So now when we have other evidence to show us that the speed of light is breakable, that you can go beyond that, and we start researching into the quantum realm. That's what quantum physics started to, the entanglement, the whole bigger picture of what is really going on, and these events that can happen and affect us immediately, like a coronal hole, Earth facing, can cause earthquakes within hours. And it's almost like a perfect science now, where these guys, they have these alert statuses, and it always happens depending on the facing of the planet to the events, the rotation, that all plays a part. There's these energies that are constantly moving through the Earth. The atmospheric energies, as well as the dynamo that's in the Earth. We're all connected to that. So when we're in the Lifestream energy, that connects us even deeper. So we become truly connected. That's the reason why it allows us to elevate in a higher state of awareness. And we have the ability to reconnect and self-correct our physical body, as well as our mental stasis. So this is where it becomes a lot of fun, when we start to connect the dots. And it helps when you have like-minded individuals on the journey. You can relate to it. You can reference. And there might be something that will be said in like 3 or 4 weeks, and all of a sudden you'll say, that's exactly what I was experiencing. That was going on with me. And I just usually smile when that happens, because we start to synchronize. We start to realize, what's happening, the bigger picture.
Are you planning on telling us teaching us what's in that box?
Oh, sure. You can come over to the shop. I'll show you what's in it.
You know what? I'd love to.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
fun, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason why it works is because it works on an ancient principle of understanding. And this is the rub, that's also the romance to it as well.
Yeah,
E-
that's what I like.
Yeah, each one of these devices, each one of these generators has a component inside that's about 70 to 80 years old. They haven't been manufactured since the 40s or the early 50s. And it's a forgotten technology. And that, because we move from a particular method of technology to solid state in the 70s, and then we evolved to silicon. So now, when we understand the evolutions, but, when we understand these full circles that have happened, of course, we could just look at LA and remember, when our grandparents said, oh yeah, there were train tracks and electric, trains running from there to downtown, and they took them out for the freeways. Now 80 years later, what are we doing? We're putting them back. So these arcs, but the technology really hasn't changed much, in regards to that aspect, because we've kind of been in this box for a long time. So when we had an opportunity to shift over a century ago, that's what's the best way to explain it? It's just the human capacity to understand wasn't there when we were offered another method. The industrial age was in place, and we were just setting the standards, and we were just wiring the world. And we said, okay, this method works. It'll do everything that we need it to do. And so when you offer something new that changes that implementation, then it's not easily accepted. if it doesn't meet the dollars, you know, in the infrastructures. It's almost the same thing. It's like that's the reason why we see the hard-headedness of the automotive companies trying to create an alternative energy until it actually started getting forced, or until someone outside of the box said, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to just focus, and I'm going to make it happen. And then when he did it, then the people chose. They said, I want that, and I'll wait for it. I see that, and this is what I want. And that's the change. Now, all of a sudden, everyone else is going, well, the people are speaking, so we should start getting involved in that, because the people want that, and we're going to lose business unless we jump on. You know, so that's a really dumbed down version of it tonight. But when we understand the paradigms, and we start addressing paradigms and the paradigms that the world is in, and also our own paradigms, and the ability to shift those and really what they are. And of course, when you are moving into a new paradigm, the dismantling of the old paradigm has to take effect. And in that moment, it can be very chaotic when it's coming apart. Unless you are in a higher state of awareness, you realize that has to disassemble, that this has to break apart for the new to come in. You know, and that's one of the key things behind the journey. And when we start to master this way of thinking, then our lives become brilliant. You know, and the people that we affect, you know, you don't sell anything to anybody. You don't try to convince them. You know, they're just going, what's going on? Wow, this is amazing. I want to know more about what you're doing. And then you just find that level of grace to be able to just do it effortlessly. You know, and it's always fun, especially when we do it around the holidays. You know, and then, you know, like when people like start getting their family, they say, oh God, you know, Thanksgiving, oh God, you know, the dynamic. And, you know, we crossed over on the last workshop. People were like dreading going home because he said, yeah, you know, everyone gets drunk and belligerent and all that. I'm just not looking forward to that. I go, well, that's what's happened. You know, but maybe you can affect it this time. Maybe you can go in with a different dynamic and have a great time. But you have to set the intention and believe that it's possible to change it, unless you're just going to allow the same thing over and over and over again to happen. But that's kind of about what we understand the realities of choice. And we'll get into that later. That's part of the advanced work. So yeah, it's good stuff.
I remembered a number of years ago, at one point feeling like I was trying to hold my life together, and then came to the realization I had to let it fall apart so it could fall together.
Yeah, that's the understanding of paradigms. Is when you especially when you know what you want, you know, and you put that in motion. There are laws that how the universe works in amazing ways, but there's a constant to it as well. And the more that we realize how it works, and we decondition ourselves, you know, we deprogram ourselves, and then we realize how to program ourselves to make it effortless or to make it easier, then our lives are perceived to be brilliant. You know, then we're grateful. You know, when it happens. And it's just amazing to witness that dynamic and to be able to stay in it. Of course, you know, we got to remember, this is like one of the greatest illusionary fields that has ever existed on this planet. And it's been amplified to really keep us out of realizing what we're capable of. You know, when we understand the amplification effect, it's so easy to go out there and get disrupted and totally forget and all that. We call it the third dimension is a very powerful illusionary drug, and it's really good at what it does. You know, there's so much interference to keep you away from what we truly are. But then when we tap into this energy, then that reconnection is a lot easier, you know, and it happens, you know. And that's the exciting part, is when we realize what we're tapping into. And then at the end of the workshop comes the greatest gift of realization, which there is something that will be shared. And you'll get it, you know, but not until the end.